vaccinated? Can I?
Yeah, I'm sorry, yes, we're all vaccinated
Yes.
and boosted.
I am.
Like that.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to.
But you're...
I have a 15-month-old at home, and he was recently ill, so I don't want to bring anything else home with me.
Got it.
1 illness per month, please.
Okay. And Representative, why don't we start with you, and if you would, because we're filming this, we know your district number and we know where it is, but people watching may not, so if you would introduce yourself, tell us the district that you're running for, your party affiliation, and a little bit about yourself.
Great, thank you. Good morning. My name is Lisa Reynolds. I use she, her pronouns, and I am running to be state representative for the new Oregon House District 34, which is mostly unincorporated Washington County, north of Highway 26 and east of 185th. It's where I've practiced pediatrics for over 20 years. And so I am a state representative currently for our Oregon House District 36, and probably more importantly is that I'm a pediatrician. I've been a pediatrician in Washington County, as I mentioned, for over 20 years, and in that work, I definitely see what is and what is not working for Oregon families. And I got into this race over 2 years ago because I felt there was more I wanted to do for my patients than what I could accomplish in the exam room. And I think I would say in my first term in the legislature, I see where I've been able to influence that. The issues that, of most importance to me is our very broken behavioral health system, and I think we're starting to make some long overdue investments in that system. Gun violence prevention, which is of course frighteningly on the rise these days. Oregon's recovery from COVID, the COVID pandemic certainly broke open a lot of inequities in our communities and in our schools that we knew were in existence, and we have a lot of repair to do on that front. And then of course healthcare for all. So thank you, I'm honored to be here today.
Great. Jennifer?
All right. Hi, I am Jennifer. I go by Jen. I am running to be the state representative for House District 34, new district, which is exciting. It is mostly made up of sort of the Bethany area with a little bit of the Cedar Mill area. We moved in there and it was very exciting because my husband is Bangladeshi. And so our family is American and South Asian. And so that particular area where we live in Bethany has a lot of Indian, Asian, South Asian people around. So it was great for the food and also to see all of the other kids running around and knowing that my son won't feel quite as out of place as some of the other areas in the city. And having my son just really brought to focus how much needs to change in the world so that the world he grows up in is one that is better than the one I did. And I think that's what we
Can you tell
all
us
deserve
about
to
your
do.
professional background?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I am an attorney. I work at Rydell & Associates. We are on a state contract for public defense. So I work primarily in juvenile dependency. So when Ms. Reynolds was talking a lot
did you
about
say juvenile dependency?
Yes, that is the Department of Human Services, DHS cases, when Child Protective Services gets involved and removes a child from the home. This is a particular area of law that's not criminal, but not quite civil,
And
that
so
involves
you have a contract to represent the child,
the child, the father, the mother, any of those that come up. It sort of goes on a rotating basis. So I do represent some children, I represent some fathers, and I represent some mothers.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, that system needs a little bit of help, a lot of help. Right now, we are looking at wait times to enter any of the mental health, substance abuse, even something as simple as family counseling for children and parents all together. We're talking at least 2 or 3 weeks, if not for that like family therapy piece. We were recently told 4 to 6 months to begin scheduling for that. And it's partially due to a lack of funding, but also due to a lack of people coming into the field. I mean, it's something that is really tugs on your heartstrings and you can get burnt out very quickly. And so making sure that as a state, we provide the right type of resources, whether that's funding, whether that's mental health for the people who are taking care and working in this industry, to make sure that we keep people on, that we're not churning through people, and so that people can access the services that they need to and that they want to.
So you're asking Democratic voters in your district to vote for you rather than the incumbent in the
That's
primary.
correct.
Therefore, you need to make the case against the incumbent more than just what you stand for. So can you talk a little bit about what she hasn't done or what she's done that you disagree with?
Well, there is a particular area within childcare, so access to affordable childcare that's also culturally informed is really important for, I know, my family, but also a lot of families in my district. And there hasn't been movement on that recently in the state legislature that Ms. Reynolds has been a part of. The other piece is that I have, in my career enforcing law, seen far too many laws that are written, let's say clumsily, that have a great intention behind them, but don't quite effectuate that because of the wording or the language, and they have to come back, take more time and money in the legislature to make.
And has she been guilty of writing bad laws?
In the legislature, there were, I think, 4 laws during the last 2 years that had to come back and be rewritten. And I believe that my experience in applying laws can help make sure.
Was she the author or chief sponsor of those laws that were poorly written?
That I don't have off the top of my head. So I'd have to look.
I'm just looking for some specific problem you have with the incumbent, which, you know, in theory, voters have got to hear from you.
So my big thing is the lack of addressing childcare, and then
is there a specific bill she voted against, or just she hasn't been enough of an advocate, or?
It's more of the lack of advocacy and lack of even introducing bills related to particularly being able to be increasing the at-home options for childcare so that we can get a broader variety or diversity within the childcare industry. So
specifically, you would like a state-supported in-home childcare? And I'm putting words in your mouth, so that may not be fair. I'm just trying to figure out, if the world were yours and you're in the legislature, what exactly would you have the state provide in the way of childcare that it's not now?
The process for certification being streamlined, as well as making sure that the access to resources and funding so that people who are wanting to start an in-home child care can do so, which would help address rural areas that don't have enough access, a lack of diversity in child care providers, so that we can make sure that...
And is the certification process for child care providers currently just too cumbersome?
Cumbersome, and then in reviewing certification and staying up to date on all of that, there are holes within that sometimes childcare can slip through. So I want to increase access, but make sure that that is access that we can all have a guarantee of safety with, that it's not just some random person opening their home, that there's been training there, that there is a guarantee of safety there.
Great.
Thank you.
So, Representative, can you tell us a bill that you worked on since you were elected that made Oregon better, or made Oregon better for your constituents particularly?
One of the bills that I'm particularly proud of, and I'd love to be able to address the child care issue, but one of the bills I'm particularly proud of, because I have deep activism work on gun violence prevention, but in the 2021 legislature, we passed Senate Bill 554, which requires that guns are locked when not in use. So this will go a long way to prevent children getting their hands on guns, injuring themselves or others. It also can go a long way at preventing adolescent suicide, and it can go a long way in preventing school shootings, because the vast majority of school shootings are done with guns brought from home.
Were you a sponsor of that bill?
I was a chief co-sponsor.
Okay.
And it was actually work I've been doing for years before I was at the legislature, so it was particularly meaningful to be there when it passed.
So what's the bill that you worked on that you wish had passed that didn't pass? That was significant?
Oh, gosh. You know, I will say there's another small gun violence prevention bill, and I say small because it's small in scope, and that's closing the Charleston loophole, which requires that a background check be completed before a gun is released to a purchaser. We'll be bringing that back in 2023, along with the bill to put very strong restrictions on ghost guns. Actually, the Attorney General discussed that yesterday on Think Out Loud. But boy, there's a lot of other bills. I wish we would have, a bill I was personally involved in. I wish we would have done something around legislator pay so that we can make this job more within reach especially for young people starting out in their careers. That's something that I think is important. Campaign finance reform, yeah, there's probably quite a few on the list I wish we would have done action. But what we have done a lot of action on is childcare, so if there's the moment to talk on that, I'd be happy.
Yeah, could you respond to Jen's concerns?
Yeah, I mean, Ms. Kinsey's right. I mean, Oregon has a horrible childcare desert. Every single county is deemed a childcare desert, and that was before COVID. COVID blew that open, like it blew so many things open when so many childcares had to shut down because of, fear of passing germs. The childcares that stayed open were those who took care of kids who were essential frontline workers. But, largely due to the work of Representative Karin Power and Representative Jack Zika, who's out of Redmond, both parents of young kids who know this firsthand right now. I mean, I know it firsthand from 20 years ago, but firsthand right now. We've put tremendous amount of resources into the child care system. We just passed a $100 million bill in the 2022 session. I think what Rep. Power and Rep. Zika recognized is that child care, which was sitting in the Department of Education, was being kind of subsumed by K-12 education. So as much as I don't like adding new agencies, we have developed a whole new agency called Department of Early Learning and Care so that we can totally focus on that 0 to 5 work and also some after school child care work for the K-12 kids. So tremendous resources and reorganization have happened. Ms. Kinsey's right, the process is a little onerous to become licensed. We are passed legislation so that people who rent homes can actually have child care centers in their homes. That previously was very difficult to do. We were able to modify some of the sprinkler requirements to hope that more in-home child cares can open up.
And so the money is going to be used to do what?
Great question. It's a couple things. One is to help retain the people who are doing childcare now. As many of you may know, the market economics around childcare is completely broken.
But what does that mean?
So
is the state going to be making cash payments to
the state is going to be making cash payments to some childcare providers. Yes. But more importantly, we're looking at increasing the rate of reimbursement for childcare by through employment-related daycare subsidies, and that's using federal and state funds. So childcare is both too expensive for families and it doesn't pay workers enough. It's the reason why kindergarten works is there's huge government subsidies to pay the people to provide the services. Childcare just doesn't pencil out for so many families.
Is the situation in Oregon worse than in other states?
No, this is happening across the country. That's why part of, was it Build Back Better? One of those was looking at significant federal investments in childcare.
What was the biggest mistake you made since you've been elected in terms of legislative work? I
would say that I made a big mistake my first week on the job in listening to an advocate on a bill, signing on to the bill, and without reading it.
What was the bill?
It was an optometry expansion of scope of care bill. And what
You listened to the optometrist and not the ophthalmologist? That was a mistake.
I know. It was a mistake. And it's not just that it was a mistake of who I listened to, it's that I really didn't do the homework. I'm not against expanding scope of care for optometrists or naturopaths or nurse practitioners or physician assistants, but you got to really know what that scope was. And I didn't read the bill. I took my name off it. I called everyone, and they were like, "Wow, how nice of you to admit you're wrong." I'm like, "Yeah," because that's actually something we have to do as physicians. You have to admit pretty quickly when you're wrong because you have to change course. So I feel comfortable admitting when I'm wrong, and that was just. I haven't made that particular mistake again because you make it once. I'm sure there are other mistakes I have made, and I'm trying to think of something else. I think sometimes not advocating in the right way for a bill that I'm trying to pass. Learning the intra-chamber politics. that's
Yeah.
a whole other thing.
Jen, how long have you lived in Oregon?
I moved here in 2017, and I have went and got my master's in the United Kingdom from late 2018 until the beginning of the pandemic, and then I've been here since. So I'd like to say 5 years, but I think it's more like 3.5.
Where'd you go to law school?
I went to law school at Drake University in Iowa.
Yeah, and where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Sioux City, Iowa, although my dad grew up part in Iowa, part in Oregon, and so we've got family out here, and we always came back to visit out here, and I was like, why are we living in Iowa? I want to live in Oregon.
So why did you go to the UK to get a law degree? Because you can't really, that doesn't really translate, right? I mean, I know you have a law degree and you're a member of the Oregon Bar, but what's the thinking behind going to the UK?
So I went and got my master's in international law and governance in the UK. Part of that is it's cheaper. So even though I was taking out federal loans to go and do that, it was still cheaper than trying to do that here in the States. And the other part was that I really wanted a better understanding of international law, and I felt that being in a foreign country with a lot of other international students would give me a better understanding of international law.
So you've invested 5 or 6 years in your law degree. If you were to knock off the incumbent here, you basically hardly have time to practice. So
I have talked to my my boss at my law firm, and within the work that I do, especially currently, there is a fair amount that we can do virtually or from home. So being able to work my schedule around more than just the standard 9 to 5 business hours, in addition to having some help from him as he's semi-retired, can help sort of bridge that gap, because currently, as Ms. Reynolds mentioned, legislator pay and the fact that this is supposed to be a part-time job is a real issue, because I think, as all of us know here, being a legislator is more than just part-time. I know Ms. Reynolds is constantly running out and meeting people and making sure that even when the legislator is not in session, that she's still aware of all the issues and talking to people and sort of doing that intra-chamber politicking piece and making sure that everyone can get on the same page, and the pay just doesn't reflect that. And so understanding that and making arrangements with my current career is something that I wanted to do before I entered the race.
So you, I think, also work for the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office. Tell us about that.
I did. I worked there for 3 months. I volunteered, so I was working full-time as a special prosecutor and then parking cars on the weekend overnight to make ends meet.
Parking cars?
Yep, I was a valet at the AC Hotel downtown. It was an experience, let me tell you.
So it was essentially an internship at the DA's office.
Yes and no. So a lot of the student interns are only there for a couple days. They kind of get to peek in on a lot of different things. While I was there, I was a fully licensed attorney, and so I took over community court. And I felt that the way they were doing community court, which was having a lot of rotating DAs or interns and that kind of stuff handle it, didn't give it the priority that it needed, because there are a lot of intricacies in trying to coordinate so many different social services with community service, with other things, to create alternative resolutions for misdemeanors, that having someone there full time, at least in my view, it allowed me to really understand what was appropriate for different charges and really make that a smoother and a better process for everybody involved.
So did you want to stay in the prosecutor's office, or were you just there to sort of see how it looked?
I thought about it, and initially I was interested in staying in the prosecutor's office, but the caseload, now don't get me wrong, public defenders have an insane caseload, and there needs to be a lot done to do that, but the amount of time I'm able to dedicate to a case at my current firm is more than I was able to do as a prosecutor, because the caseload is just, especially after COVID, quite unmanageable. But the other thing is that I have more flexibility and a little bit more of a team environment in my current law firm than in the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor's office is like, great, you're there from 8 until 4:30, and then any of the cases that you're taking to trial, you have to go home and do on your own all of the additional work, because you can't work on your caseload during the day because you're in court trying to get through all of the other cases. So for me personally, my life right now, having a small child, it was nicer to have a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more of a team environment in the public defense arena.
Great. So Representative, can you tell us an example of a time that you've had to stand up to a powerful interests. You've had to tell the unions you can't be with them. You've had to tell the Oregon Medical Association that you disagree with them. Somebody who would have expected you to be with them, and you've had to say, no, I disagree with you. That has been difficult. We're looking for an example of your independence rather than of you being just somebody who goes along and get along.
You know, there are two, I'd say, relatively minor things. One was when there was a bill last year that combined kind of repairing the language around non-unanimous juries, which have been deemed unconstitutional at the federal level, and they combined that with doing away with the cap on non-economic damages. And and as a physician who knows that if we the malpractice kind of culture and economy can price out some physicians from practicing, especially in rural medicine, I didn't want there to be an infinity cap on non-economic damages. I was fine with raising it. So I voted no on that bill, knowing that it didn't mean that now non-unanimous jury verdicts were going to hold forever, but it was kind of a cynical pairing, so I went against the Oregon Trial Lawyers Association with that. This year, I will say I voted yes on a bill that...
Can I back up
yes,
for a second? So
yes.
the cap on non-economic damages was then $500,000?
Yes.
And remind us what happened with that bill.
The bill passed, and now there's no cap on non-economic damages.
So it's infinite.
It's infinite, yeah.
And do you really think that's going to cause fewer doctors to be practicing in Oregon?
There is some evidence, and this is why I took the time to write kind of a vote explanation. There is evidence that when there are not caps on non-economic damages, malpractice premiums do go up. And when you're in rural Oregon competing for physicians, and we have Washington State that does have caps, it does make it difficult sometimes to recruit physicians to areas where they're having a difficulty covering those.
Isn't part of the reason there's a shortage of rural physicians is because the medical profession has historically restricted the number of people who can go to medical school, so we have to import doctors from foreign countries, and I mean...
Yes, no, that's definitely part of it, and there's restrictions on residency slots. Absolutely, no. We need to be training. We need to be training more and more doctors. We need to be training more and more nurse practitioners and physician's assistants. There's no question. And you make less money in rural Oregon than you do in Portland. It shouldn't be that way. You're providing the same care, if not even, I would argue, even more care and harder care in rural Oregon when you don't have the neurologist up the street to see that patient this afternoon. So yes, absolutely. Good point. But there is an influence, I think, in the non-economic damages.
So what's the other bill where you had to...
The other bill where I actually voted yes, but wanted to vote no, and wrote a pretty descriptive vote explanation that got picked up by the Lund report. But as a lot of you know, the politics around COVID has spilled over literally into the emergency room, and patients refusing COVID care, patients aggressive against doctors who say, I'm going to have to put your dad on a ventilator for COVID, where healthcare workers are literally being assaulted. It's hard to believe, but it's true. And this is fairly new and part of the horror of the divide, anti-science divide.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a bill this session where it would make, if a patient assaults a healthcare worker, it would make it a felony. Right now it's a misdemeanor, and what the healthcare workers are telling me is that they call the police on these, police don't come because it's a misdemeanor, we need to make it a felony. I have no interest in minting new felons. I have a severely mentally ill brother who has accosted healthcare workers. He's also accosted law enforcement. I know he's only alive today because he's a white man. So when he is psychotic, he is dangerous. Luckily, he doesn't have weapons. And I was very, very concerned about what this bill would do. But my friends in the emergency room said, this is really important to us, Lisa. You are one of us. We are being accosted. We think this is a solution. I said, I don't think this is the solution, and here's why, and I wrote a letter. The bill was slated to pass in the House. I decided to vote yes out of support of my colleagues, but I felt horrible doing it. And I literally to the moment couldn't decide if I was going to vote yes or no. And I felt I needed to support my friends who literally have been on the front lines of COVID for 2 years, have lost colleagues to COVID. So I voted yes for that. That was hard. It ended up dying in the Senate. Thank you, Senator Gelser-Bloom.
Nigel, in his story about Tina Kotek last week, which I'm sure you read, talked about...
I have not, sorry.
Shame on you. I'm sure you will. But he spoke to a larger issue, which is it possible that the dissatisfaction with Tina is informed by the fact that Democrats have ruled the state for 4 decades, and if you look at Oregon on a variety of measures, we're a failing state. And to what degree should we hold the Democratic Party accountable? And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
No, I think it's a great question, absolutely, and I certainly share the concern of where Oregon is on so many parameters. I will say Oregon is a failing state, but Oregon has done so many things really well, and this is putting my pediatric lens on. We cover every single kid. Every single kid in Oregon has health care. That hasn't happened in any other state, and I will say that was Tina Kotek, but I'm not here to tout her. We have the best reproductive, health laws in the country. These are things that could easily go away, I think, in a Republican administration in this state, so I worry about that. But yes, our government is clunky, it is sloppy, it is not run well. I think, the issues around unemployment insurance were a travesty. I know from my patients when their struggles, to get food stamps and WIC, it's like almost like separate things. And so I think we can run a bit more smoothly, but I do think there have been a lot of excellent policies passed under Democrats. And I haven't heard a great vision from the Republicans on what they see.
I think the point is less about policy than execution.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
And
I think
so
Tobias
I guess the
Reed says
question
that
is,
too.
what's wrong? To whom do we hold accountable for the pitiful execution? Not the great policy, not the ambitious progressive policy. And you know what Republicans say. What Republicans say is you were completely bought and paid for by public employees, and of course you're never going to demand efficiency or accountability from the Department of Employment or from, you pick the state agency. And so how do you respond when people say, look at the record, who else should we hold responsible? And again, has nothing to do with you're absolutely right. I think Republicans would fund health care for children if they had a choice, or make sure that we're the best pro-choice state in the nation. That's not what's at issue.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I would say that this is something that I think about a lot. I mean, the government...
You're closer to it than we are. What is that a legitimate argument that Democrats aren't willing to hold public employees responsible and demand accountability?
It's very interesting because I talk to my colleagues about this a lot. And I think when we talk about it, we talk about agency heads. And I would say most of us firmly believe we need to hold agency heads accountable. One of my colleagues said they just waited out. They know you're only going to be here 8 to 10 years. They just waited out till you're gone if you're one of those ones that's kind of like, hey. But I absolutely think, and if you talk to, I don't want to name names, but there are several of us who meet and talk about how are we going to hold. In particular, we put $500 million into behavioral health in 2021. Has care improved for people in Oregon? Not yet. It's coming, but we need metrics, we need goals, we need monthly check-ins.
And who's standing in the way of that?
No one is standing in the way of that. It is starting to happen with Representative Noss and Senator Lieber, who hold the purse strings for that. So there are regular meetings checking in with how we're doing. I think the system as it stands now is we check in again at legislative days, which is in June. I don't think the legislature should not engage between March and June, for sure. We need to, and I know that Rep. Noss and Senator Lieber are watching that, and I'm trying to get more involved in that. But you're absolutely right. No, you're totally right.
So where's the governor in that equation? I mean, the agency directors report to the governor. So
Yeah.
You're saying the governor is not paying attention, or?
Well, I would say there have been several agencies that have gone off the rails a little bit, and I don't know if, I think the employment division, so certainly the housing, so this whole issue about, getting money out to renters to prevent evictions, we had a special sessions for this in December. I'm really proud of the fact that we were able to prevent thousands of evictions in COVID. Talk about, our homeless problem, that would have, doubled it if not worse. But, I think that there has to be accountability when things don't run like they should. And is that the governor? Yes. Is that Tina Kotek? I'm not sure. You know, as someone who's been in Democratic power for, you know, the past decade.
How do you feel about the head of the Oregon Health Authority not being a scientist or a doctor?
That doesn't bother me as much as just overall transparency, accountability, metrics. You know, COVID got off to a rocky start here in Oregon, but in the end, you know, Oregon's COVID measures saved 5,000 lives. So I'm a fan of Oregon's COVID response. At the Behavioral Health Division within OHA is where I'm currently trying to have an impact, or, you know, figure out how we actually have true accountability going forward. I don't want after the fact audits. That's important. You know, what are we going to do going forward? You know, $500 million, is it doing what we want?
Are you able to just call, you know, talk to Steve Allen and say, what's going on here?
Yes.
And how do those conversations go?
You know, gets a little bureaucratic kind of quickly, you know, and a little defensive, you know, but that's okay. I'm going to demand that we have metrics. I feel like every agency should have metrics. What is our goal for this quarter? You know, is it getting, you know, 60,000 more people jobs, or open up, you know, 10,000 new childcare slots this year, you know, something. I mean, we need to have metrics. I think it should be public. I think there should be, you know, dials. Are we meeting the metric? Are we red, yellow, green? Absolutely. I also think we need to make the system much easier for citizens to engage, and there's been work on this. You know, Minnesota has done really good work on having kind of one-stop shopping for people's social needs, economic needs. Yeah.
I do think that part of being able to hold people accountable is transparency. So after the fact audits bring a level of transparency, but there's nothing really that you can do at that point other than say, hey, you didn't spend it where you needed to. I think transparency as we're going along. I mean, if you're spending money at a restaurant, you do that after you've gotten your food and you know what you're paying for. I think that in government, we really need to keep better track of, as it's happening, where that money is going, and not just in the money that was given to behavioral health or the money that was given over for childcare, that we're not really seeing that improvement yet, but also in campaign finance and in campaign contribution limits, and making sure that it's not just the limit, but that there is a transparency there. So when you're asking the question of, have you been able to say no to your donors, that we know who those donors are and how that might have affected the way people have voted.
Do you know who those donors are?
At this point in time, it's very, cumbersome to get citizens involved, which is being able to look and say, oh, out of Ms. Reynolds or anyone else's campaign, these are all of the people that donated, and these are the big, like how much was donated, how much of a say they have in.
It's all public record.
It's hard to get through as someone who's going in and looking.
How much money have you raised?
I have raised $1,100.
And who is your largest contributor?
My largest contributor wasn't financially, it was access to the van from the Democratic Party of Oregon. So
Sorry, access to the van?
Voter access, or voter whatever.
Yeah, one of those
statewide voter
pieces
file. Statewide voter file.
that allow you to campaign more efficiently.
Who's your biggest donor representative?
It's probably my mom. I need to
What's
check
she
on
want?
this. I know.
I told you.
And it's out of state money.
She's a special interest.
Out of state.
Be careful, be careful. All right, unfortunately, we are out of time. We have one question that we are using to try and humanize all candidates, not that you two aren't human, but this year we're asking people when they realized, or for them, when was COVID sort of over. We know it's not quite over, but our news editor, Aaron Mesh, is a big Blazer fan. He said for him it was over when he could go to a Blazers game in person without his mask on. So was there an event or a moment when you said it's kind of over? I ask you that as you sit here with a mask on. So
I think every person is going to have a different answer to that. And for me personally, because I have a 15-month-old at home, my answer is not quite yet. And I will let you know when I get there.
Okay. Doctor?
I did go to a show at the Keller Auditorium, and it was probably about 2 months ago. So it was, masked and whatever.
What was the show?
Vaccine card. Jesus Christ Superstar. I went with Senator Steiner Hayward. It was, I got like goosebumps at the beginning, but the show itself wasn't that great.
Did you ever see it in New York, or?
I did not see it in New York. I'm sure it's better in New York.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you both very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
for
both.
having
Thank
us.
you for having
Yes.
us.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
You as well.